Welcome to Echobarrow, the channel where history meets insight. If you love deep dives into global conflicts, untold truths, and expertly researched stories from the front lines of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. In February 2022, when Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, many analysts and world leaders predicted Kyiv would fall within days. With the world's second most powerful military, a vast arsenal of over 12,000 tanks, 1,500 fighter jets, and 1 million active-duty troops, it seemed inevitable that Russia would crush Ukrainian resistance quickly. But that didn't happen. And now, more than 2 years later, Ukraine remains standing, fighting, and resisting one of the most sustained military offensives in modern history. So what went wrong for Russia? Why has a military giant failed to defeat a much smaller, less equipped neighbor? To understand the reasons behind Russia's failure to achieve a swift and decisive victory, we must first examine the raw balance of power between the two nations. At the start of 2022, Russia possessed the world's fifth largest defense budget, approximately $65.9 billion, and commanded a military force of over 1 million active personnel and 2 million reservists. Its arsenal included more than 12,000 main battle tanks, 4,000 military aircraft, over 5,000 artillery systems, and one of the world's largest nuclear stockpiles. In contrast, Ukraine had a much smaller defense budget, roughly $5.4 billion, with about 200,000 active troops and 900,000 reservists. Its inventory included approximately 1,200 tanks, 300 aircraft, and several hundred Soviet-era artillery systems. What Ukraine lacked in volume, it compensated for through modernization, agility, and strategic partnerships with NATO countries. This stark asymmetry in raw firepower explains why many believed Ukraine's resistance would collapse quickly. But numbers alone don't win wars. Let's now look at the assumptions that shaped the Russian invasion. Russia's plan was based on speed and shock. Declassified intelligence reports and leaked Kremlin documents later revealed that the Kremlin expected the Ukrainian government to collapse within 72 hours. Russian forces attempted a decapitation strike, sending over 300 paratroopers and special forces into Hostomel Airport, just outside Kyiv, to create a corridor for an armored push into the capital. Their goal was to take control quickly, install a pro-Moscow regime, and avoid prolonged urban warfare. This plan failed almost immediately. Ukraine's forces, many of whom had been training for such a scenario since the 2014 annexation of Crimea, responded swiftly. At Hostomel, Ukrainian National Guard units and special forces engaged Russian troops in a brutal 3-day firefight, destroying at least 30 aircraft and stalling Russia's airborne assault. That early battle not only protected Kyiv, but also disrupted the entire Russian timetable. Next came Russia's logistical nightmare. Russian convoys stretching over 40 miles were spotted by satellites north of Kyiv. These convoys became symbols of poor planning, stranded vehicles, fuel shortages, breakdowns, and attacks by small Ukrainian units using Western-supplied Javelin anti-tank missiles. According to the UK's Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, Russia's failure to establish secure supply lines meant their armored thrust stalled, exposing them to counterattacks and ambushes. Over 2,000 armored vehicles were lost in the first 6 months alone. Command and control was another issue. Russian units operated with rigid hierarchies and little flexibility. Junior officers had minimal autonomy, which slowed response times. Many soldiers were conscripts, poorly trained and ill-informed about their mission. Morale plummeted. Reports from intercepted communications revealed confusion, fear, and even desertions. Meanwhile, Ukraine had adopted a decentralized model of command, allowing field units to adapt, improvise, and respond quickly to changing situations. Intelligence failure was critical. Russian leadership severely underestimated Ukrainian resistance and overestimated local support. Moscow believed Russian-speaking Ukrainians would welcome their forces as liberators. Instead, they were met with defiance, even in cities like Kharkiv and Mariupol, where Russian was widely spoken. Civilian resistance became a powerful force, blocking tanks, sharing real-time intelligence, and fortifying urban defenses. Ukrainian military leadership under General Valery Zaluzhnyi also proved highly effective. They integrated NATO standard training and embraced Western doctrine after 2014. By 2022, Ukraine's army had transformed from a post-Soviet structure into a nimble, Western-aligned fighting force. They used drones, mobile artillery, and advanced missile systems like HIMARS with pinpoint accuracy. HIMARS alone took out over 400 Russian ammo depots and command centers in the first year. Another massive factor was international support. The United States alone contributed over $75 billion in aid, including more than $45 billion in military assistance. The UK, EU, and Canada contributed tens of billions more. From Javelins and Laws to Patriot systems, Caesar howitzers, and Leopard 2 tanks, the West essentially armed Ukraine with the tools to resist. Meanwhile, Russia found itself increasingly isolated. Over 10,000 global sanctions were imposed on Russian individuals, banks, and businesses. Export controls blocked access to over 80% of Western microelectronics. Russia's failure in the information war also deserves mention. While the Kremlin tried to justify the invasion with narratives about denazification and NATO provocation, global audiences largely rejected these claims. Ukraine's communication strategy, led by President Volodymyr Zelensky, used emotional appeals, real-time updates, and social media mastery to win global sympathy. Zelensky's nightly addresses were viewed by millions, earning him praise and support from leaders like Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, and even neutral states. As the war dragged on, terrain also played a role. Ukraine's vast open fields, river systems, and urban centers turned into defensive strongholds. From the muddy spring conditions, what locals call Rasputitsa, to dense forests in the north and fortifications in the east, geography favored the defender. Russia's massive armored columns became liabilities in this environment. Satellite data from Maxar and Planet Labs confirmed massive bottlenecks and destroyed infrastructure in Russian-controlled areas. Moreover, corruption and inefficiency within the Russian defense sector came to light. Many units were under-equipped, commanders embezzled funds, and maintenance was substandard. Russian tanks like the T-72 and T-80, long considered formidable, were destroyed in large numbers by lightweight Western systems. According to Oryx, an open-source intelligence blog, Russia lost over 2,500 tanks by the end of 2023. Then there was the matter of goals. Russia never clearly defined its war aims. It shifted from liberating Donbass to denazification, to regime change, and back to territorial defense. These inconsistencies hurt morale and made strategic planning difficult. Ukraine, on the other hand, had one simple goal: survive and defend sovereignty. Even in areas Russia occupied, it failed to win hearts and minds. Russian-installed administrators in Kherson and Melitopol faced constant sabotage and resistance. Partisan movements emerged, and locals continued flying Ukrainian flags in defiance. Occupation only deepened Ukrainian national identity. In a 2023 Gallup poll, 89% of Ukrainians said they supported continued resistance despite the hardships. Another major failure was in mobilization. When Russia began conscription in late 2022, it triggered protests and a mass exodus. Over 700,000 Russians reportedly fled to countries like Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Finland. Many of those drafted were poorly trained and deployed hastily. Casualty rates soared. Western intelligence estimated over 300,000 Russian casualties by mid-2024, with more than 100,000 confirmed dead. Compare that to Ukraine, where public support for the war remained high. Zelensky's approval rating exceeded 80% through 2022 to 2023. Volunteers flooded into the army. Western intelligence, satellite imagery, and real-time battlefield coordination made Ukraine's operations more efficient than anyone had expected. Diplomatically, Russia also suffered. Once a major player in global energy, its gas exports to the EU dropped by 70% between 2021 and 2023. Gas pipelines like Nord Stream 1 were shut down or sabotaged. Europe pivoted rapidly to alternatives. with Germany alone increasing LNG imports by over 300%. So why hasn't Russia been able to win? Because it faced an opponent it underestimated at every level. Because the war it prepared for, a quick decapitation strike and occupation, wasn't the war it got. Because corruption, poor planning, bad intelligence, low morale, and international unity against it created a wall of resistance. Ukraine wasn't supposed to survive, but it did, and it's still fighting. In the end, power isn't just about tanks and jets. It's about strategy, leadership, morale, purpose, and legitimacy. On those fronts, Russia faltered. Ukraine didn't. And that's why, despite the odds, the war remains unwon. The story isn't over, but this chapter belongs to the defenders. Thank you for watching Echobarrow. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to support our mission of bringing history's turning points to life. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.